This is a giant guinea pig. Wait, no, that's actually a capybara. They are the world's largest rodent, and they have fully committed to being everybody's emotional support animal. Caimans nap next to them. Monkeys ride them. Ducks just land on their heads, and the capybara doesn't even flinch. They are so aggressively chill that the entire internet has collectively decided they are the main character of the animal kingdom. But back in the Pliocene and Miocene, capybaras, or at least their closest relatives, were not the vibe. They were the threat. One of them may have had the strongest bite force of any mammal ever recorded. Another was so large it was essentially a bison with buck teeth. And the ecosystem they lived in was so horrifying that getting that big was the only logical response. So what happened? What turned the descendants of potential apex adjacent monsters into giant guinea pigs that let toucans sit on their faces? And what were things so bad back then that a rodent felt the need to weigh 2,000 pounds? Let's start with Josephoartigasia monesi. The name alone sounds like a legal threat. This animal was a rodent. A rodent. And it weighed somewhere between 1 and 2 tons. For context, modern capybaras max out around 150 pounds. Josephoartigasia potentially hit 2,000. That is not a large rodent. That is a car with incisors. It holds the record for the largest rodent that has ever existed on this planet. Not the largest found so far, the largest, period. It lived in South America around 3 million years ago during the Pliocene, lumbering around what is now Uruguay. And when scientists finally got a good look at its skull, things got interesting fast. They modeled the bite force, and the numbers are genuinely unsettling. In normal feeding, its incisors could generate around 1,400 newtons of force. That's already stronger than a tiger's bite, but the jaw structure suggested it could peak at nearly 4,000 newtons when really putting in the effort. For reference, a crocodile sits around 3,700. So we have a rodent, an herbivore, with a bite that competes with a crocodile. Now you might be thinking, okay, but it only ate plants, so who cares how hard it bites? And sure, it was an herbivore, but think about why a plant eater would need a bite that strong. Elephants have tusks. Hippos have those terrifying canines. Huge herbivores in dangerous environments almost always develop weapons, not for hunting, but because when a predator shows up, you need to be able to say, "This will not go well for you." Josephoartigasia's teeth were probably used for digging, stripping bark, cracking open hard vegetation. But if something came at it, those incisors weren't decorative. A 2-ton animal with crocodile-level bite force is not a meal. It's a mistake. And then there's Phoberomus pattersoni, which loosely translates from the Greek to fearful mouse. They named it the fearful mouse, and they were not being cute about it. Phoberomus lived about 8 million years ago in what is now Venezuela. It weighed around 700 pounds. That's bison territory. It looks like someone took a capybara, fed it for 8 years straight, and then just kept going. Same blunt herbivore face, same semi-aquatic build, same general energy. Just scaled up so far past reasonable that it loops back around to horrifying. But here's the thing about Phoberomus that you have to understand. It wasn't just big. It got big in a place that was actively trying to kill it in the most creative ways possible. Ancient South America during the Miocene was a closed continent. It had been isolated from North America for tens of millions of years, and evolution, left to its own devices with no interference, had produced an ecosystem that was basically an unsupervised science experiment. The predators there didn't look like anything alive today. Terror birds were still active. These were flightless birds standing up to 10 feet tall with a beak that functioned more like a hatchet than a mouth. They didn't peck at things, they punched holes in them. giant crocodilians patrolled every river system, and because the large placental carnivores that dominated North America, your ancestors of big cats, wolves, bears, hadn't arrived yet, South America's predators had evolved to fill every niche in ways that made no sense and asked no permission. So what does a rodent do in that world? Same thing the giant sloths did. Same thing the rhinos figured out. Same thing every large, slow herbivore across every continent eventually lands on. You get so massive that attacking you is no longer a reasonable business decision. Phoberomus was semi-aquatic, which means it was spending serious time in rivers that were full of enormous ancient crocodilians, and it went in anyway. 700 pounds of rodent just calmly wading into a river full of giant prehistoric crocodiles. That tells you everything about how the math worked. Yes, the river is dangerous, but it's less dangerous than being out here with the terror birds. Now you might be wondering, if these things were so well adapted, why didn't they just stay huge? Why did the capybara shrink down to 150 pounds instead of inheriting the throne? Because being enormous is only worth it if the things that made being enormous necessary are still around. The Great American Biotic Interchange happened around 3 million years ago. The Isthmus of Panama finished forming. North and South America connected for the first time, and suddenly all the carnivores from the north, the ancestors of jaguars, pumas, saber-toothed cats that had been in an evolutionary arms race with each other for millions of years, came flooding south. South American animals had never seen anything like them. The local mega-rodents were built to survive terror birds and ancient crocodilians. They were not built for fast, intelligent, pack-hunting placental predators showing up fresh and hungry with millions of years of competitive evolution behind them. The giant rodents collapsed fast, and the giant herbivores across the continent went with them. Too slow to reproduce, too big to hide, too specialized for a world that no longer existed. Josephoartigasia held on a little longer into the Pleistocene, but eventually went the same way. 2 tons is only an advantage when the threat matches it. And the aquatic angle? That's worth talking about too. Modern capybaras are still fundamentally semi-aquatic animals. They can hold their breath for up to 5 minutes. They sleep with just their nose above water. Their eyes, ears, and nostrils are all positioned near the top of their skull, almost exactly like a hippo, so they can stay submerged and still see, hear, and breathe simultaneously. Their feet are slightly webbed. They are, in every meaningful sense, built for the water. And that's not a coincidence. That body plan goes back a very long time. Phoberomus had it. The whole capybara lineage has been running this same semi-aquatic playbook for millions of years. Get in the water when danger comes. Use the river as a wall between you and whatever is trying to eat you. Stay calm, wait it out. It's the same strategy. It just doesn't require 700 pounds anymore to pull off. So what about the ones that survived? What did the modern capybara actually keep from all of that? More than you think. That same semi-aquatic body plan is still fully intact, just compressed. The calm, almost eerie patience in the face of predators. They don't bolt unless they have to, and when they do, they go straight for water. That's millions of years of survival logic running in the background. They're not unbothered because they're dumb. They're unbothered because they have a plan and they know it works. And socially, modern capybaras live in groups. Big ones, up to 100 individuals in some cases, which is an underrated defense strategy. A jaguar doesn't want to walk into a group of 40 large, water-capable animals where every single one of them is going to splash into the river the second things go sideways. It's just not worth it. So the capybara turned community into armor. They replaced mass with numbers. Now we are, again, a problem. Habitat loss, hunting, the exotic pet trade, Getting hit by cars because a capybara crosses a road with exactly the urgency of something that has survived millions of years without ever once sprinting. Deforestation strips away the riverbank vegetation they depend on, and their natural camouflage, that low, round, bark-colored silhouette half submerged in murky water, works perfectly against every predator except the bulldozer. But the capybara is, so far, hanging on. But they're adaptable in ways the giants never were. They eat a huge variety of plant matter. They thrive near human-modified landscapes as long as there's water. Some populations have figured out that farms and rice paddies are basically just free food. They are annoyingly good at surviving us. The giants tried to be indestructible. The survivors decided to be unnoticed. And everywhere you look at a modern capybara, you can still see the ancient blueprint underneath. The same semi-aquatic skull. The same patient, almost philosophical stillness in the face of danger. The same willingness to just get in the water and wait. They didn't lose the plot. They rewrote it for a smaller body in a world that no longer rewards being a 2-ton rodent with a bite like a crocodile. Josephoartigasia was built for a world full of terror birds and isolation. Fulberomus was built for a world where the river was safer than the land. When those worlds ended, those animals ended with them. The capybara quietly became something that could survive any world. And it did it by convincing everyone. Jaguars, anacondas, caimans, and the entire internet that it was never a threat to begin with. That's not weakness. That's the longest con in mammal history.